What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of Crush City Territory presented by Fox One. I'm Chandler Rome, joined today by a special guest host that we've had on before, and I hope you remember, Adam Spolane. Adam, how are you? Good to have you back.
I'm good, Chandler. How are you?
I'm doing well. Tyler, for those that are wondering, Tyler claims he is sick. Lassie beat the Gators last night, so I'm not sure what he has to be sick about. Josh is at a charity event that I assume has an open bar that he is enjoying. So I'm sitting here with Adam. Adam, we've had now 3 or 4 days to process kind of everything that has happened in the Astros orbit the last couple of days. You know, hitting coaches Alex Cintrone and Troy Snicker not retained, head athletic trainer Jeremiah Randall not retained, catching coach Michael Collins not retained, and AGM Andrew Ball not retained. Tyler and myself, we gave our thoughts on everything. As someone that covered this team about as much as anyone at home and watched obviously most of their games from afar, anything surprise you about what they did and the changes that they made to their, not only their coaching staff, but their front office and their medical team?
No, I think most of it was expected. I guess the Collins thing was a little surprising just because that's not a name that you hear a lot about. But I think if you watched Yainer Diaz catch over the last couple of years, you could probably see there was something that probably needed to change there. The hitting coaches, it's been talked about to death, and I'm sure people are tired of hearing about it. But to me, it almost feels like they made changes just to say that they made changes. And the thing that kind of sticks out to me is that those two guys were hired by Luno and Hinch. They stayed on with Dusty and Click, and then Espada and Dana kept them as well. So you have 3 different regimes thought that they were good at their jobs, and then for whatever reason, this year obviously didn't go well, and they just decided that they had to move on. Sometimes you get stale, sometimes you need to make changes, but those 2 guys in particular, they didn't seem like they were guys who were old school and just kind of lost in, the ways of the past. It seemed like those 2 were very bright and were always looking to make changes with certain things. And for whatever reason, it didn't work. I don't know. I thought offensively they were pretty good up until Paredes got hurt, and then he got hurt and everything went to hell. And I don't think that I wasn't in the hitters meetings. I don't think you were either, but I don't think that Snicker and Cintron were telling the guys to swing at pitches outside the strike zone. So like that to me is that's where this comes from, is that they were chasing pitches at an absurd rate again. And I think that's just more because those are the types of hitters that they had. Now, maybe they bring in, maybe the players weren't getting good enough scouting reports on the pitchers that they were facing. And maybe the hitters weren't as prepared for who they were facing as maybe they needed to be. But that's all I can think of at this point. To me, I think they made a change just to say they made a change.
Yeah, I mean, I think in one of the stories I wrote, I called them sacrificial lambs.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. I don't know if it rises to like scapegoat level, but look, when you miss the postseason for the first time in 9 years, and you have an owner of a team that is not his expectation. He has said multiple times the window's never closing, and I expect a lot. You knew changes were going to come, and I think those were maybe the most quote unquote convenient ones to make. And I don't want that to sound crass, just given that these are guys with livelihoods, with families, with these are human beings at the end of the day. And you never want to talk like that about guys that are no longer employed. But I think you hit on something with the hitting coaches, maybe from an angle that we haven't taken it, is that Cintrone and Snicker really were like the archetype for what modern front offices want in hitting coaches. Like, you had Alex Cintrone, who played 10 years in the big leagues, was a former player that knew how to talk to players, that had been in their shoes before, had been in the grind, knew how to approach them, was very popular within that clubhouse, came from kind of the, if you want to put it in simple terms, came from like the baseball background, had done it, had dirt on the pants, had a back of a baseball card to go back to, things like that. And then you had Troy Snicker, who I don't think ever played professional baseball, or if he did, he never got out of high A. Was a catcher in a small town in Georgia in college. Of course, being the son of Brian Snitker, the longtime Braves manager, grew up in clubhouses, grew up on the minor league buses going back and forth. But again, is a guy that was very into, the mechanics of hitting, got a, had a kind of a sports science background, did kind of the art of the swing things. So you had two guys that really played off of each other very well. And you had maybe the kind of guys that modern front offices look for in hitting coaches. But, I think what you said, and I know you alluded to it, I believe on social media at one point too. These guys have been around for an extended length of time, and that stretches to Jeremiah Randall too, who had been the trainer for 10 years. That stretches to Michael Collins, who had been on staff, I believe, since 2018 in some capacity. He wasn't on the major league coaching staff that whole time, but was a bullpen catcher and worked his way up. But I think change can be good, like just a new voice, a new set of eyes, because like you said, it did seem like just some of the stuff may have gotten a little bit stale. And I do think there are benefits and there are definitely pros to bringing in just a different perspective on maybe how to message to these guys. Because like we've said, I guarantee you Alex Centrone sat Yainer Diaz down multiple times and said, please do not chase, every first pitch strike outside of the zone you see. I guarantee you Troy Snitker was doing the same thing with some other guys that chased a lot. Maybe hearing that in a different way, maybe presenting it in a different way, maybe that can lead to some results. But I find it hard to believe that those two guys are gone and now the offense is just going to magically get better.
Yeah, I'm very much it's about the players. And at the end of the day, it's always going to be about the players. The coaches are always going to take the hit when things are going bad. The players are always going to get the credit when things are going good. Things went bad last year. You can't fire the players, so you have to fire the coaches. And I imagine both of those guys have interviewed for other jobs with other clubs throughout the years. I imagine that they will both have jobs very quickly at some point here this winter. And I think that's where it's always a little risky to do stuff like this, because when you fire good people, it is very possible that the guys that you replace them with are not nearly as good, and then you wind up going backwards even further. So it's a risk with what they did. I'm sure they felt like they needed to do something to change things up, but to me, it was just making a change just to say you made a change.
Yeah, and the minute you knew that Joe Espada and Dana Brown were going to come back, you knew that they weren't just going to run it back, right? You can't bring back just the same staff. You can't bring the same things back. Like, to appease people and to just show that there was a pulse, if you will, and that they weren't just going to ascribe this all to, we got very injured, we got a historic amount of injuries, and that was our biggest problem. Like, I think they understand that they need just a different level of way of doing things. And I'm glad you brought up, how well those guys are thought of. Troy Snitker, I don't think he ever formally interviewed, but the Cleveland Guardians were interested in Troy Snitker for their managerial role before they hired Stephen Vogt. I don't think he ever interviewed for the job, but from what I understand, he was a name that they had tossed around a good bit. Alex Centrone had interviewed, I believe, for the Blue Jays bench coach job a couple of years ago. He is one of Alex Cora's best friends in baseball, the manager of the Red Sox. Would not be surprised maybe if he ends up there, maybe. But both of those guys are going to get jobs. Like, this is not a situation where they forgot how to coach. This is not a situation where they forgot how to relate to players. These are two really, really good guys, and I think good baseball people that just, kind of were, I don't want to say in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I certainly don't want this to be, that they're blameless in this, because yes, I like you put it. I mean, it's 99.9% on the players. They're the ones that go up there with the bat. They're the ones that go up there and have to make the swing decisions, things like that. But, there is something to be said about, when you get that title, when you are the hitting coach, when you're the hitting coach for a team that has this kind of expectations, there is an onus on you to find a way to make it right. And they couldn't do that. But again, it was much more of a player problem, roster construction problem, than maybe a coaching problem. So I feel like, again, we've litigated that to death. One of the interesting things from the post-mortem press conference that happened a couple of weeks ago was Joe Espada mentioned that he was going to call Carlos Correa, who is now, you don't need me to tell you, you hear people say it all the time, he's the leader of the clubhouse, the leader of the team. They got him back. He went right into the leadership role. He is El Jefe in there. Joe Espada said he was going to call Carlos Correa and they were going to go to dinner and talk about, what needed to change, what things they'd like to see implemented, what things they'd like to see done differently. I thought it'd be an interesting exercise for both of us to maybe think about, and this can be dangerous too, putting words in somebody's mouth, especially Carlos Correa's. What do you think? What do you think's the conversation at that dinner table, wherever it is, in a very nice restaurant in like River Oaks or West U here in Houston? What do you think that conversation entails, and what direction do you think it goes?
I think that you have to ask him, okay, you came in during the season, you saw things when things were going good, you saw things when things were going bad. Where did we screw up? Like where did things go wrong? And be honest, I want to know from top down, from the manager, from medical staff, from the GM, from everything. Where did we come up short here this year? And I think that as for Espada, I think he's got to be willing to take any criticism that he, might be given by Correa, who, this is the first time that he had managed Correa before. So I think that it becomes an interesting look to say, hey, Carlos, did I change? Am I coming up short in certain areas? Because Correa's played for some good managers. He played for AJ Hinch. Rocco Baldelli had a bad ending in Minnesota, but I think that Baldelli is considered to be a pretty good manager. So, where are there areas where I came up short personally? And then you start to branch out to other areas of the organization, whether it's other players, whether it's other staff members, whether it's the front office. Where did we go wrong? I think that's the first question that he needs to ask, is just where are areas where we are coming up short right now?
It was interesting to hear, when within the first week Correa got back to Houston, Joe mentioned a couple of times that he could already tell the hitters meetings were different. He could always, because Correa was taking the lead on a lot of stuff, and he could tell that just the tone, the energy, and kind of what was being said in those meetings was different. He said that about the hitters meetings. He said that about the advanced meetings too, and they only do those before every series. But they meet on the first game of every series. They meet and they do what they call an advanced meeting, and that's basically they go over that team that they're playing for the next 3 or 4 games. They go over, all right, they do this, they have this tendency. You got to keep your eye on this base runner. You got to keep your eye on this guy to do this in certain situations, and they go over that. I thought that was interesting, just because, like we mentioned, Carlos Correa was here when Troy Snitker and he played under Troy Snitker and Alex Centrone. He and Alex Centrone are very close. Correa was saying when he got back over here that he was texting with Centrone already about his swing before the trade even went through. So I thought that was interesting to hear from Joe, and it was something that just kind of at the time went in one ear and out the other. Just with hitters meetings are different, of course, because Correa's in there. He brings just kind of a different kind of aura. But to hear it now that they have made the moves that they've made, and we've seen what happened after the trade deadline, because that is when the offense was at its worst after the deadline. Now, part of that was Isaac Paredes, as you mentioned, having the hamstring that sidelined him. Part of it was, the Jose Altuve. I don't know if the amount of games got to him, but that was when Jose Altuve really hit one of his funks. It was when Jeremy Pena was hurt for a good bit of that too. And, Jesus Sanchez, one of the deadline acquisitions, didn't do much. So they had to, adjust and put in some lesser qualified guys to be in there. So I don't know that they talk specifically offensive philosophy, but Correa was at the forefront of guys as this thing was starting to go south. Is all he kept saying is, we need an approach. We need a collective approach. We need an approach. And I'm not saying that that's something like the hitting coaches have to go to the board and say, all right, this is our approach. But it was interesting to hear him say that. And I wonder if maybe, when Joe goes to dinner with him, or it could have happened already. I don't know. The dinner could have happened and I just don't know about it. But I wonder how much Correa will have a say in maybe the type of coach, the type of voice, or the type of person that they bring in here to maybe help with that approach that Correa said they did not have.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that he was a guy. Listen, he played for the team. It's a very different team from the one that he left. The manager's different, front office is different. Basically, most of the clubhouse is different. I find it interesting that he felt comfortable enough to just put himself right in the middle of everything like that. But that might show you that he felt that something was going wrong. Maybe he could kind of sense that things weren't the same and things weren't on track the way that they had been in the past as soon as he walked in the room. So I think that would be really interesting to ask, like, right away, like, hey, could you sense that something was off when you walked back in the clubhouse? I knew you knew some of the guys, and you were friends with some of the guys, and you said all the right things, but the fact that he felt the need to just be so hands-on with everything and change the course of the hitters meetings and the advanced meetings, he might have known. He might have sensed that something was just a little off and that they had maybe lost their way to a certain degree.
And Correa does have experience with this. He talked about one of the reasons he got off to such a slow start in Minnesota this year is Minnesota changed hitting coaches.
Yep.
They changed their entire hitting staff, I think, from minor league roving coordinator to everything. They overhauled their entire offensive identity in Minnesota. And he said he didn't mean it pejoratively. He did not mean it to throw shade on the new hitting coach in Minnesota, who I don't have his name available, but basically said it took him a while to get to know just a different voice, a different person that comes in, and it caused him in part to have a little bit of a slow start. The interesting part is, and I think this is a cautionary tale for a lot of maybe Astros fans that automatically think a change in hitting coach is going to either make things better, or that people that think these two guys were a big problem. The hitting coach that the Twins fired is a guy named David Popkins. David Popkins got employment pretty quickly. He's now the hitting coach of the Toronto Blue Jays, who just had the best offense in the American League and are going to play for the American League pennant starting this evening. I think that goes to show you that, a lot of it's about personnel. Did David Popkins, was he a bad coach in Minnesota and did he just become a good coach in Toronto? I don't think that he forgot how to coach in the tenure in Toronto or the tenure in Minnesota. Then on the flight to Toronto to take the job, he had this epiphany. It's like, oh, I'm going to be this good of a hitting coach. I think it's a very interesting, parallel and dichotomy to this.
It's funny you bring that up because the Twins' old infield coach is a friend of mine. And so he was one of the guys that took the hit last year too. So that's kind of always been in my head for the entire year. But yeah, it does show you, like, when you change voices, these guys it's not a computer, it takes time for these guys to gel, and it takes time for personalities to come together, and it takes time for coaches to learn players and for players to learn coaches. And it's not one of those things that happens right away. And you have to figure out, how am I going to coach this guy? How do I get through to this guy the right way? What is he like? And just, it's not one of those things that's like real easy. And so you could tell that, they cleaned house in Minnesota, and it's one of those things where it didn't take right away. Maybe that was the right decision to clean house in Minnesota, but you got to be able to, you don't have a lot of time, with these players to try and get things right. Like the offseason is very short. Spring training is very short, and you've got to try and get on the same page quickly. And that's tough. And so that's why I don't want to go back to the hitting coach thing, but that's why it's a risk what they did, because you could wind up getting guys that are totally opposite of what you want with your players. So that's an interesting aspect of it. And listen, the Rangers fired their hitting coaches during the season. How'd that work out? The Rockies fired one of their hitting coaches during the season. They didn't get a whole lot better after that happened. So it's hard. There's no like one fix for every problem that you have. There's no magic wand that you can go to.
I certainly don't want to throw shade on Brett Boone, who is more accomplished in baseball than I will ever be, as one of the more accomplished just players in general that's out there. But Brett Boone had no coaching experience, at all. Like, the dude was hosting a podcast when Bruce Bochy called him and wanted him to replace whoever the hitting coach was that the Rangers fired. So again, it just kind of goes to show you what a hitting coach's maybe role is. Like, Brett Boone came in there and, by all accounts, just basically told them, like, just chill out and pick your pitch. And then just showed up and, from what I understand, like aviators and Ray-Bans every day, basically like his brother Aaron does with the Yankees, but just kind of showed up and was chill, and there wasn't a ton of pressing. There wasn't a ton of overload of information. And maybe that team needed that. Maybe that group of players felt there was too much information or too much, too much thrown on their plate at once. I never got that feeling from Cintrone and Snicker. Like they were two guys that, yes, they certainly bought into the numbers, and they were modern players and they were modern coaches, but I never thought it was an information overload from them. So it'll be interesting to see which way they go. And a side note, if you'd like to watch David Popkins at work, you can on Fox One. And a reminder that the show is brought to you by Fox One. Fox One is now live, and you can stream all your Fox favorites together in one place, including the American League playoff, the American League Championship Series featuring David Popkins' Blue Jays against the Mariners, and as well as the World Series. Let's talk about those American League playoffs real quick. It's pretty much gone, Adam. I don't want to say as I expected it would, but you have what I think are the two best teams in the American League Championship Series, the Mariners and the Blue Jays. The Mariners, I'm worried about them just from they played the sort of game against the Tigers to end that series in Game 5. That game can screw you up for like 4 or 5 days. And they've got a very quick turnaround. They had 1 day in between that game and then playing Game 1 tonight on Fox 1. How do you see this series going, and what do you like about the matchups between the Blue Jays and the Mariners?
I loved every second of Game 5 of Tigers. Just the strategy and just how many starting pitchers had to be used. Like we were very close to seeing Rafael Montero pitch in that game. I think maybe a couple more innings we would have seen Montero. I going into the postseason, I thought that Seattle would win the American League, but man, like you said, they had a huge dent that got put into their pitching. They kind of were fortunate that they didn't have to like extend Gilbert and Castillo that much on Friday. It's not like they had to throw 6 innings. So I think I haven't seen if they've announced a Game 2 starter yet. But I think the one thing that you did kind of see with Seattle is just how much depth that they have with that bullpen, and they're going to get. It looks like they're going to get Wu back at some point in this series. So I think they've got just enough pitching to keep that thing together and to make that a really good series. I think they might. The first 2 games of this series will be tough for them, but I think if they can somehow get a split in Toronto, I think they win that series.
The only thing that worries me about the Mariners a little bit, I like their lineup. I really do. Like they have depth in their lineup that very few, the power and the depth of their lineup is, I think, better than the Blue Jays. But I think the number was Julio, Suarez, and Arozarena struck out like 28 times in the ALDS. This is a team that they are going to need those guys to, because one thing you'll see about Toronto, they put the ball in play. They do not strike out. They put the ball in play. Maybe it's the new hitting coach. Who knows? But they put the ball in play. They don't strike out. They're not going to hit a ton of homers. You know, Vladdy will pop one every now and then. George Springer's having a renaissance year. He's obviously capable of going deep. But this is a Toronto lineup that thrives on putting the ball in play, passing the baton, and kind of stringing innings together. And seeing them do that against a Yankees starting rotation that I thought was maybe the best in the playoffs. They hammered Rodon, they hammered Fried. They didn't do much with Schlittler, but they were better with him than certainly the Red Sox were. But I think for the Mariners to keep this, I think for the Mariners to advance and do what they need to do, they need to show that power up and down the lineup. They can't have Julio and Arozarena and Suarez striking out as much as they did and having so many unproductive and empty at bats, and thereby just putting the onus on Cal Raleigh to carry them.
I think they will be very happy to not have to face that Tigers pitching staff. I think that Tigers pitching staff was very good, and they were going at a very high level. Like, I guess Jack Flaherty, his start in Game 3 was probably, I think it was Game 3, right? Yeah, that was the one game where they kind of had things going a little bit offensively. I think everybody else, though, on that Tiger staff, aside from Rafael Montero, was just really, really good that entire series. And I think that not having to face those guys will be a big benefit to that Mariners lineup.
Maybe they want to face Tarek Skubal. They've beaten him 4 times. They've beaten him 4 times this year.
They didn't beat him. they won the games, but they didn't beat him.
He's incredible, man. And you got to watch that on Fox 1. You can watch from the MLB postseason to NFL on Fox to Big Noon Saturdays with Fox 1. You get it all live. Start your 7-day free trial today. Offers are subject to change. You can go to fox1.com for complete terms and conditions. Fox 1 streaming now. Pretty good offer too. Right as the ALCS starts, you can get on that and get to Fox 1 and help out. Back to the Astros. Obviously, that's what people want to hear about. I don't doubt anyone's listening to this podcast wants to hear about the Mariners. Adam, the one thing that I've kind of had front of mind, and I don't know if this is going to come up over dinner between Joe Espada and Carlos Correa. Joe Espada can probably call the guy that we're going to talk about and go to dinner with him. And that's Jose Altuve. I think one of the keys for the Astros to figure out what they're going to do this offseason and how they're going to shape their roster, I think they have got to figure out what they want to do with Jose Altuve. What is his role? Where do you want him to play predominantly? And understanding that they had a plan for that going into this season, then Yordan Alvarez missed 100 and something games. Like they had to adjust the plan. But I think until you know, all right, we want him to be a platoon in left field with Alvarez. We want him to maybe be our primary DH and let Alvarez play in left field a good bit of the time. Or we want to just, scrap the left field thing. We'll live with his bad defense at second base. Let him play second base for 110, 120 games. Until they pick a lane there, I think it's hard to start talking about the rest of their roster because the rest of their roster, most of it, is pretty expendable, and you can start to talk about moving pieces and trading guys and dangling in trades. Like, you're not dangling Jose Altuve in trades. He's not going to become a part-time player. Like, he is paid like an everyday player. He's the face of your franchise. He will play a majority of the time. They need to figure out what they're doing with him first. Then after that, I think a lot of the conversations can get crystallized a little bit.
I think I would split left field and DH between him and Alvarez. I thought that he was adequate in left field. I think that another year of experience will certainly help. I don't think he can play second base anymore. Now, they in all likelihood are not going to have probably the sport's greatest ground ball pitcher on their staff anymore. So maybe that changes the equation a little bit. But I just don't think he can play second base. I just don't think that is tenable at this point. And then I also don't think he can play 155 games. And the way that he faded down the stretch kind of showed you all you needed to see. Like, he cannot. He'll be 36, next spring. You can't play a 36-year-old 155 games, especially if top of the order. Got to run around a lot in the outfield. I think, and we talked about this back, the last time I was on with you. Like, they need to do a better job of conserving him. And I get he wants as many at-bats as possible and for historic reasons. And that makes perfect sense, but he wasn't very good down the stretch. And so all those extra at-bats that he wound up getting, they weren't very good at-bats, and that hurt him too. Maybe if he plays 15 fewer games, he would have been a better player for them in September. And then maybe they're still playing at this point. So for me, I split left field and DH between Alvarez and Altuve, and I lessen the workload on Altuve at this point. At this point, you just can't play him 155 games.
I do want to give some benefit of the doubt here. I think if they had their druthers, they would have done exactly what you just talked about. But by the end of it, they were so injured, and they were to the point where, and let's also remember, Jose Altuve was injured too. Like, there were people in the org that were basically saying, like, if this wasn't September, he'd be on the IL and it wouldn't even be a question with his right foot injury toward the end of the year. So I don't know how much that had to do with the last 2 or 3 weeks of him having a right foot injury that would have sidelined him had it been the regular season. But let's also say, like, they tried, right? I mean, he took 211 plate appearances as a DH this year, like, which is more than he had taken at any point in his career. And let's also put out there that he thrived in the DH role. He had an 816 OPS in those 211 plate appearances at DH. It was 742 when he was in left field, and it was 759 when he was at second base. So from what I've asked Joe about this, we've asked Altuve about this, whether he likes DHing or not. I don't know if it's personally his favorite thing. I think he's growing to like it a little bit more, but he's obviously taken to it because the production shows that. Like he was a better hitter this year. Out of the 3 positions he played, he was a better hitter when he was the designated hitter. Now, the problem is you have Yordan Alvarez, and the DH spot in general has been a place where whoever the manager is, AJ Hinch liked to use it to give other guys days off their feet. Dusty Baker did the same thing, and then Joe Espada, especially with having Victor Caratini on the roster, he would love to have that DH kind of be a rotating thing. But I do wonder if it could be beneficial to maybe and this is the time where you do this, because this is a time where you tell Yordan Alvarez, hey, if they want to go this route, like, hey, we're going to want you to play about 100 games in left field next year. Like, you need to go this offseason and you need to get ready for that. Or if it's, you go tell Isaac Paredes, hey, we're going to play you at second base this year. I don't think there's anybody in baseball that thinks you can do it. You have this whole winter to figure out how to get that done. That's why these decisions need to be made now, because the interesting thing, Adam, about what they did last year with Altuve, it seemed like the left field decision came very late. And maybe I was just bad at my job. Maybe we as the media were just bad that we didn't report it earlier, but it didn't really come out that they were going to expose Jose Altuve to left field until I believe it was FanFest. And FanFest is usually around the second or third week. Usually in the second or third week in January, which is in a baseball offseason. That's pretty late. So that came about pretty late. And I wonder how much that, I mean, he still had, those 6 weeks in spring training and then the 3 they had almost 3 months to learn it, but still, I wonder how much that impacted it too. But I think they need to make that decision first with him. And then they can start talking about, all right, Paredes or Walker, Dubon or Urias, like, what are you going to do with Jesus Sanchez? Then you can start making those maybe very consequential decisions, but certainly less than a guy that's the face of your franchise that's going to be your highest paid player next year.
I want to say Espada said that they had brought up the left field thing to him kind of early in the offseason. I don't think it got out, though, until FanFest. But I want to say...
Well, the only reason it got out is because they went around, they came back around on Bregman. When Bregman was still out there, because it was painted as Altuve was going to be a good teammate and move to left field so Alex Bregman could come back. And it certainly, the way it was initially portrayed was not the way I think by the end of it really happened. Like they approached Jose Altuve about moving to left field before they even thought they had a realistic chance of getting Alex Bregman back. And it just so happened that they could use the latter to introduce the former and make it look good for all involved.
Yes.
Now, I'm certainly not here saying that Jose Altuve looked bad. I mean, he's one of the more selfless guys of his stature you'll ever meet. I really think that whatever they tell him to do, he would be open to, as long as you alluded to earlier, they don't have a significant cut in his at-bats or his plate appearances.
Yeah, I think that you saw him play left field a whole lot more than I did. I thought he was fine. I didn't think he was great. He's not going to win a Gold Glove, but I thought that he handled himself better than I think a lot of people thought that he would. And because of that, I think I like him playing out there a little bit more, but that also puts a little bit more wear and tear on the body too when you do that. And I don't think there is a world where Yordan Alvarez can play 100 games in left field. I just don't think his legs will be able to hold up. And I think that's why they're in kind of a tough spot, is just for that reason, where they're probably their 2 highest paid guys, or not because Correa's in there, but two of their 3 highest paid guys are basically second base, left field, DH. Those are 3 non-premium positions defensively, and that's a tough way to allocate your resources. And
I mean, if you really want to get down to it, they're both DHs. At this point, like, if we really want to be truthful, like, they're DHs. Yes. They're two of the 3 highest paid players in their team are DHs.
Yes,
and
that's a tough way to go about business,
right? And we've talked about this. Like, the 7 players they have coming back on guaranteed contracts are going to account for about $160 million of their payroll in 2026, presuming they're all on the roster. They combined to accrue 4 wins above replacement last year, according to Baseball Reference, those 7 guys. Now, Yordan Alvarez was part of it. He only played in 48 games. Josh Hader was part of that. He was on the injured list for 2.5 months. But Lance McCullers was part of that too. We don't need to get into that. Christian Javier was a part of that too. He didn't return until August. Like, you hope with maybe full health that these guys can up that, but they're not going anywhere if those 7 guys come back and they get that production from those 7 guys.
Yeah, you're totally right about that. I don't know. Do you feel like they can? Do you feel like he can play second base at this point? Like, you got to see a lot of it at the end of last season. Like, do you think they can survive defensively with him playing a good portion of the season at second base?
I mean, he can. They can put him out there. They just have to understand what's going to happen. Like, they have to be ready for just, you can position him as well as you want. Just his range is just not there anymore.
Yeah, like,
he doesn't have the range to play like he did 10 years ago. And to be honest with you, like, when you start to look at it, neither does Isaac Paredes. That's why no one in the baseball world thinks he can play second base, is because he has no range. Like, he doesn't move laterally very well. That's what at third base, what he was really good at, he was good at the straight line, come in on the charging balls, and he was good if you kind of drew a circle around Isaac Paredes, like a wide one, like not a huge one, but if there was a circle, if they hit it in the circle, he would get it. If it was outside of the circle, it was tough. I mean, I think they could, but I think something you brought up as well has to be thought about here. Like, they could put him out there, but like, they also have to be cognizant of what's that going to do to his legs, just from taking at bat, because all of his value is tied to his bat. You have got to do whatever you can with Jose Altuve to make sure his bat stays elite and above league average. And if they think that is letting him go stand in left field, where, again, all we talked about last year, the reason they did this was because they knew nothing would get hit to him. And when you looked at chances among left fielders that were qualified and that had as much out there as Altuve, he was at the bottom of the league in chances out there, which meant he got nothing hit to him. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean he can't just that doesn't mean he can just stand there. That doesn't mean he can just stand there and bite his nails for 9 innings. He still has to run. He still has to, get to balls in the gap. There's still movement there, but there's probably less movement out in left field, especially at Dyken Park. They probably want to still shield him from some bigger outfields, other places, but he moved probably a little bit less in left field when you take it all into account. And there's less maybe quick movements. There's less lateral movements. It's a lot of straight line running, things like that. So, I mean, yes, they could put him out there at second base, but they would have to be ready to live with the consequences, both from the defensive side, and you'd have to be ready for maybe about mid-June or July, once the games have piled up on him, to maybe wonder if it's taking an effect on him offensively.
Well, and I was at that first spring training game that he played in left field, and he played 7 innings and didn't have anything hit to him.
Right.
So that kind of tells you all you need to know about the whole thing with the chances, and you're just not going to factor into things as much when you play left field. That's why I think left field is a spot for him. And
I think so too. And I mean, they don't, as you kind of look at what their other options are, and let's say that they have the meeting and they're like, all right, Altuve is going to play most of the time in left field. We'll give Alvarez some days in bigger parks and we can DH Altuve. Now you get to the infield and it seems like we'll have this debate until they do something or until someone says something otherwise. But it does seem like you're in a spot where you're either telling Isaac Paredes you're playing second base, or you have to dangle him in trade or dangle Christian Walker in a trade discussion and move Isaac Paredes to first base. If you were Dana Brown, if you were Joe Espada, because Joe Espada has some say here, like it's going to be his roster. He watches these guys. He understands them just as good as Dana does. What's your move there? How do you solve this?
So the first thing I'm asking is, do we think Christian Walker is salvageable? Like, was this just a one-off thing? And do we think that we can get his bat going? Because if the answer is yes, then I think I'm trying to trade Isaac Paredes. And if I don't, then I'm trying to see if I can find somebody to take on a good portion of Christian Walker's salary. Not a good portion, but a portion of Christian Walker's salary to kind of settle a little bit of a logjam that you have at first base. So that's the first thing I'm doing. I'm picking between Paredes and Walker. Which one can I either get something for, or can I get some salary relief? And then you figure out second base. I think that I thought Arias was fine when he played. I think Dubon is fine. The numbers for them in arbitration, if you go by the MLB trade rumors projection, is a little high. I think I would try and get something multi-year done with Dubon. Like, hey, 2 years, 9.5 with some incentives. Because I do think that Dubon is somebody that you want to keep around just for him as a person. I think that he's a good guy to have in the clubhouse. And I just think the versatility is really important too, where he can play 7 different positions and be good at all 7 of them. And, he's not a great hitter by any stretch, but he's not going to embarrass himself up there. And he's going to at least put the ball in play and make something happen there. Maybe you get lucky that, he has some good batted ball luck over a stretch like he did in 23. So that's what I would do. And then I got one more thing. I would look at the market on Bryan Abreu. They're not going to re-sign him. It is assuming Hader's healthy, it is a position of, it's not a position of need. It's a non-premium position. So can I upgrade the roster by using Bryan Abreu for a closer needy team? So those are kind of the 3 moves that I'm doing at this point.
I get it. Abreu is probably the guy of their 16 ARB eligible guys. It's probably him and Paredes. It definitely is. Those 2 would get you the most value back.
Yeah.
If you're going to take Jeremy Pena out of it, I don't think that's going to happen, but I've been wrong before. I think if Jeremy Pena had 1 more year of control left, I think we'd really be having a conversation about the possibility of them trading him. I don't think they do that with 2 years left. But Paredes, I would, if I were them, this is my opinion. You asked, is Christian Walker salvageable? Christian Walker slugged .488 with a .799 OPS after the All-Star break. Like, he was a good hitter. Like, that is by every metric a good hitter in the second half. Now, he's 34 years old. He's not getting any younger. You wonder, was that 3 months of just a flash in the pan, and then he's going to come back at 35 and it's going to be tough? Or was that something that is translatable to next year? So I think if you ask yourself, is Christian Walker salvageable? I think he showed you the last 3 months that yes, it's still in there. Like, for all the comparisons to Jose Abreu never had a stretch where his OPS even flirted with 800. That long of a stretch. That's a stretch of 3 months after the All-Star break. So, and I do think you would get a lot more in return for Isaac Paredes, who is going to make around $10 million according to MLB trade rumors, and is a Super 2 guy. So he has another year of team control after this one. Now, I bet teams would wonder, why is this the 4th time he's being traded? He's not, this is not a situation where he's traded because he's a bad clubhouse guy or because he's not well liked. I mean, they love him in there. Like, he's very quiet, like, very good dude. Like, I don't think it's a character or a personality problem. I just think he's got a lot of tools that a lot of teams covet. He sees a lot of pitches. He pulls the ball a lot. Like, he can play a serviceable third base. He can play serviceable at first base. Like, he just has tools that a lot of teams covet. So to kind of agree with you, that's kind of what I would think on those 2 things. Abreu, Tyler brought that up the last podcast, and I tend to agree, but I wonder if Yainer Diaz is probably the guy that you look to a little more, because, I don't want to say relievers aren't valuable. Relievers are definitely valuable, and Bryan Abreu would get you, it would get you it would get you some guys back. You look at Yainer Diaz, like, even with a bad year this year, like, pop 20 homers. If they can get the plate approach, there would be a team out there that thinks we can fix him. And I don't know how much he needs to be fixed. Is it little stuff here and there? Can we maybe not catch him every day like this team has to? Because, as we've talked about, this team has 2 DHs, like making a boatload of money. Can we use him at first base? Can we DH him some? Like, I think he's got a lot more value. And I think that would be the guy that if I'm Dana Brown and I'm Joe Espada, well, Joe Espada is not talking about trades. If I'm Dana Brown, Abreu's certainly a guy that you talk about. I think if you can find someone to get Yainer Diaz, who is in his first year of arbitration eligibility, have 2 more years after this one, I think that's a trade that if you get the right package, that can help you both now. You could probably get a major league ready starting pitcher, probably get someone to help, bolster your rotation, and probably get a prospect or 2 that could help your farm system.
Yeah. So really quick on Walker, because I know the metrics weren't great on him defensively. I thought the eye test, he was really good at first base. There were some shaky moments, which you're going to have, but I thought that their infield defense was really quite good, I guess, up until the end of the season. And that's with Altuve having to play more second base than they thought he would. I thought that he was a big reason why their defense in the infield was as good as it was. Paredes, he's been traded because teams have wanted him. The Cubs wanted him at the deadline. The Cubs wound up trading him so they could get Kyle Tucker. And now the Astros are just kind of in a position where they have a little bit of a glut at the position. What you bring up with Yainer, I think, is a really good point. When he had his best year in 23, it was because he wasn't catching every day. It was because he was DHing a lot. And that's when Alvarez was hurt with I think it was the hand thing then at that point.
Oh, the other hand thing.
Yes, the first one.
The hand thing.
The first hand thing. But I think that when you ask a guy to catch as much as he was being asked, he's going to wear down. He can't focus solely on hitting because he's having to deal with getting pitchers ready. It takes away your legs. That's why, to me, it's incredible what JT Realmuto does every year, because he catches so much and is still able to contribute significantly offensively. So I don't think that's a bad idea with Diaz. You re-sign Caratini. If you think Salazar can handle the backup role, then give him, the number 2 catcher's job, or look outside the organization. There's the guy who was in San Diego during the playoffs who, hey, maybe you get a reunion with him. I'm sure the fans would love that. So there's that option. But it gives you an opportunity to add to the major league roster and also rebuild the farm system. And I think that is also something that is really important for them at this point, because it just hampers so much of what they could even do at the deadline, where they were limited. If not for Minnesota wanting to salary dump Correa, they couldn't have done a whole lot at the deadline. Like Arias and Sanchez might have been the best that they could do. So adding to the system makes a lot of sense. They drafted a catcher in the first round a couple of years ago. It seems like, I don't know what the reviews are on Walker Yannick at this point. I think he was in high A at the end of last year. So he hasn't maybe progressed as quickly as you'd think that he would, but he's a first round pick for a reason. So trading Diaz, I think, would make a lot of sense, especially because, like you said, you could get a pretty good haul back for him. And there are other teams that would be able to use him a little bit better than the Astros can, just because they have some more flexibility with their roster.
Walker Yannick is in the Arizona Fall League, which is that's a good sign that he's worthy of going to the Arizona Fall League, which is one of the premier offseason destination for prospects. He did spend the whole year at High A Asheville, where he had a 766 OPS. I did not talk to enough scouts to know if he was good defensively or not, but he's 23 years old. You would think, again, I don't want to say there's just catchers just sitting out there, but like you said, if they do want to resign, they want to bring back Victor Caratini. If they do that, and then you can go find a veteran backup catcher, or a veteran, not even a backup, a guy, because I don't think they want Caratini catching every day. I think you could go find a guy that there will be people out there that you could split duties with Caratini and make it like a timeshare, make it a 60-40, or just assign Caratini's going to catch these 3 starters. This other guy's going to catch these 2 starters, and we'll just go from there.
Yeah, I think that's how most teams like to do it, and
Right.
I think people get sucked in sometimes by, well, he's a great hitter. You want a great hitting catcher? Not really. It doesn't really. Their best teams, in 19 and 20 and 21 and 22 and 23, they were really good, and they did not have a good hitting catcher. So like you can be a very good team and not get a whole lot of offense from your catcher. So I think that Caratini and somebody else, that's a perfect, like you said, timeshare at that position for when Yannick is ready to contribute in the big leagues. They have other options. You don't need to, and it also saves some money in other places too.
Right. And Yainer, no, like you just watch Diaz probably have the worst offensive season you'll see him have. And he still popped 20 homers. He's still a threat every time he goes up there. Like he's only going to get more expensive. Like, and this is his first year through ARB too. Like, I'm not sure he's going to be the guy that like you want to give a bunch of money to, and like is going to be the guy that you want to keep paying as the ARB numbers go up. So I think I think for both sides, I think for Yainer to go somewhere where maybe he's not forced to catch 110 games. He can DH, he can play first base, he can be used a little more. They can diversify how they use him. I think that would help him. And for the Astros, like again, he's probably the most valuable trade asset that realistically they would think about trading, because maybe I'm viewing it wrong, but I don't think you would get near as much for Bryan Abreu as you would Yainer Diaz. Even though you are trading Yainer Diaz, probably when his value is probably lower than it's been in a while.
No, because you're talking about a one-inning reliever as opposed to an everyday player who has had some really good offensive seasons. And yeah, I think that I would still trade Abreu, but I would certainly you got to see what the market is for Yainer, just to see what's out there. And I think that Caratini, that's probably one of Dana Brown's best signings is Caratini. I think that he has exceeded expectations by miles from what you thought that you were going to get from him, to the point where he's been one of their most valuable bats here down, the last couple of years down the stretch. So it makes sense. And again, unless they're going to just start spending money like crazy, they need to start, allocating their resources a little bit better. So that's one way to do it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of funny, Victor Caratini, before he signed with the Astros, Victor Caratini had a career 84 OPS plus. Victor Caratini, in his 2 years with the Astros, compiled a 105 OPS plus. Now, that's the constant, and we're bringing it full circle here to end this thing. I get told that every hitter that comes to Houston just somehow gets 15 times worse, and it's because of the hitting coaches, and they don't know, and they need to be able to make hitters better. But I guess it was just Victor Caratini just found it within himself to be a better hitter in Houston, and the deposed hitting coaches had nothing to do with it.
It's always the players. The players, when they go good, it's all them. When they go bad, just the coaching's just awful.
Yeah. And like you said, they can't fire the players, but who knows? They may fire some. They may fire some this winter. They've got some decisions to make, as we just discussed, and we will continue to cover all those decisions as they become a little more crystallized. Everyone's been asking, like, when's the next time we're going to hear from people? Guys, I don't envision hearing from Joe Espada or Dana Brown anytime soon. The next time that Dana Brown will be at somewhere where he has to talk is the first week in November is the GM meetings in Las Vegas. I will be there. So Dana Brown will be speaking then. So we've got about 3 weeks from now and then. And I think those 3 weeks are going to be pretty. I don't think Dana Brown's going to go to Vegas and tell us everything they're going to do. And I don't think they're going to have everything on their roster settled, but they'll have these next 3 weeks to kind of think and get their bearings and kind of get a direction as to how they want this offseason to go. Because they have a lot of decisions to make. They have a lot of fascinating crossroads to maybe confront. And it'll start at the GM meetings in 3 weeks. Until then, we will keep giving you content here on Crush City Territory presented by Fox One. As always, you can follow me at Chandler_Rome. Adam, tell the people where they can follow you to get all of your insights and all of your baseball knowledge.
Just on Twitter at Adam Spolane.
Nice.
That's it. That's it at this point.
Please do that. Adam, appreciate this. This was great. I told you I'd keep you 20, 30 minutes. I kept you 54 minutes. That's my fault. The overtime check will be in the mail.
I have all the time in the world for you.
All right. Guys, as always, you can rate and review us on Apple. You can rate and review us on Spotify as well. You can subscribe to the Crush City Territory YouTube channel so you can get notified every time we go live. Hopefully, Tyler will, quote unquote, feel better next week. He can be back and join us. Josh Reddick will be back next week where we will discuss what is next in the Astros offseason. But until then, we'll talk to you later. Thanks for listening.